Welcome back, everyone. How about those films? Are they amazing or what? It's always such a great pleasure to watch the films to get all together when they're in the program, even though I feel like I know them backwards and forwards. It's still such a different experience to see them all together. So I hope you had the same kind of experience that I have. And I'm so excited we have with us uh, two of the filmmakers and one of the film subjects to talk with us this evening. I'm going to quickly just introduce everyone and then we'll go into a great conversation, I'm sure. AK Sandhu, who's the filmmaker of A Prayer for America. Hey, AK, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Zoe Saicrup-Junco, did I say that correctly? No. The filmmaker of Marisol.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Zoe. And attorney Donita Judge from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Donita.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let me just quickly read a little bit about the filmmaker of Voting Matters, which was the last film we saw, Dawn Porter, because if you don't know her work, you should. She's quite incredible filmmaker, documentarian. She is an award-winning filmmaker whose 2013 documentary, Gideon's Army, won a Sundance Film Festival Editing Award, was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award and an Emmy, and later was broadcast on HBO. Dawn's previous films include Rise, The Promise of My Brother's Keeper, a documentary chronicling President Barack Obama's program to help young men and boys of color succeed, and Trapped, which explores the impact of laws regarding abortion clinics in the South. Trapped premiered at the 2016 Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Special Jury Award for Social Impact Filmmaking. Her most recent project, Bobby Kennedy for President, premiered on Netflix earlier this year, and she's quite busy running around. So we're so thrilled that we could have attorney Donita Judge join us to talk about the film. Donita is the Associate Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Rights. And in this role, she serves as the thought leader to the organization's executive director and has the responsibility for the organization's operational planning, long-term goals, and provides leadership and implementation of the organization's strategic vision and goals. She is nationally recognized as an expert in voting rights and challenges to voting. And prior to joining the Center for Constitutional Rights, she was co-director of the Advancement Project's National Power and Democracy Program in Washington, D.C., and co-counsel of the 2016 landmark North Carolina monster voter suppression case, the NAACP versus McCrory. And her list of honors and accolades goes on, but we'll talk to her a little bit more and find out what she's up to now, of course, during this very important season. And Zoe Saicrup-Junco was born and raised in Puerto Rico. Zoe is an award-winning director, writer, and producer, graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, and her short films have screened at festivals including Tribeca, Palm Springs, Clermont-Ferrand, and HBO New York Latino Film Festival. In 2012, her film Gabi garnered her top prizes such as the King Screenwriting Award, the Wasserman Directing Award, the National Board of Review Student Grant, and a spot in Independent Magazine's Top 10 Filmmakers to Watch. She was a 2016 Sundance Fellow, and she's working on another amazing project, which we will talk to her about shortly. And last but certainly not least is AK Sandhu. AK is an internationally published photographer and filmmaker. I think you could tell that from her films, so beautiful, who specializes in fine art portraiture, commercial photography, and documentary film. Inspired by her father's photographs of their family, AK exited a career in finance to pursue her love for visual storytelling. She tells stories that tackle the complexities of our perceived differences and inspire deeper understandings about human connections. She has degrees from Columbia University and UC Berkeley, and she blends her education and experience to continuously develop her multifaceted career indeed. So thank you all three for joining us. I mean, I feel so honored to have all of you here. So let's first start off a little bit with getting AK and Zoe for you two to talk about why you felt it was important to make these two films, especially right about now. I don't know if the timing just sort of happened or how do these things happen like this? But what did you first think of to conceive of the subject matter, and why was it important for you to make?
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, actually, Marisol was written by Tim Elliott, who plays Frederick in the short film. And my understanding is, he is a white male who understands that this particular story needed to be told from a female and a Latina point of view. And I think it stemmed from, right after the election in 2016, he had a terrible nightmare about being stopped by the cops and getting asked for paperwork. And when he woke up, he felt very comforted by the fact that, like, that's not his reality, that stuff would never happen to him. And so he started to write about that, specifically with this thing that often happens where in rideshare apps, not necessarily the driver you get is the driver that's registered with the car, especially in New York. I obviously can't speak for other states. So he started to work that idea, and then his wife, who's our producer, Lauren Sowa, offered to interview me for the project. And the moment I heard, Latina female-led narrative, my eyes obviously were on the project, because that's the one thing that really drives me. Before that, I had written and directed films about Puerto Rican women, because that is my background. So coming into this was definitely a new experience for me, because even though I'm Latina and identify with the Latino culture, I also recognize and respect that there is an immense diversity and variety within the Latinx culture, especially in the United States. So it was very important for me to bring other people in, like Emma Ramos, and Katy Velasquez, to really talk about their experience.
It's 9 o'clock.
As immigrants in the United States. And so, yeah, we started this beautiful collaboration that ended up, with the whole short film Marisol, and really getting a chance to deepen those characters a little bit. And as I was telling you earlier, tell a story that touches on the trauma that a lot of immigrants go through, but doesn't necessarily exploit the drama. It's a moment in time where she almost got caught, but you don't necessarily have to go through the whole process of kind of concretize the nightmare.
And I think you feel it even more because we don't go through it. I think the hint of it being, very present is even more impactful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think sobering moments in life can sometimes just be enough to kind of show you up and change your reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And AK?
Sure. So, sometimes watching, I appreciate you complimenting the work in terms of its look. I did shoot this almost 3 years ago in 2017, and looking back, I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. So it was a fun first short indie doc project that I did independently completely. And it actually came from a 2016 photo project that I had started called Crowning Glory. And a friend of mine had left France and moved to the United States because France had passed a law that bans all religious headwear. And I thought, and it's mostly in the public sector. In the private sector, you can still have the jobs, but in public sector, if you want to keep that government job, you can no longer wear head coverings. And I was just so appalled by that. I'm like, what if that would have happened in our country? And just inspired by that, I started an interfaith photo project, started at the local Sikh temples, my family is Sikh, documenting people and why they wear headgear. And after Sikhs, Muslims, Rastafarians, I thought of calling and trying to find Catholic nuns in the area. And by the time I had heard of a documentary project starting, the 2016 election had already happened, and there was a group of filmmakers in New York who started America Heard, a web series of short documentaries. They wanted filmmakers from every district to tell a story that was important and related to the to elections. So I remember when I called the Dominican Sisters of Mission San Jose, she was like, what are you trying to do? And I was like, well, initially I just wanted photo subjects who wanted to participate in my photo project. But now there's this documentary idea. And she goes, well, I need to tell you about the Muslim group that we're hosting. But that is, so on Monday I call her and she goes, the last prayer is going to be Friday because their mosque is now repaired and they're going back. And I was like, so by Wednesday I got permissions and I shot on Friday. And then to come back to get her interview, she said, I'm really busy, Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. And I thought, whoa, so from Friday to the following Wednesday, when I also got Ash Wednesday footage, those 2 days were the shoot. And it was like divine intervention. I was actually telling a friend of mine, and he said it much more beautifully than I can, but the idea that, we were all sort of brought together by divine flow to sort of create this. And even though we come from very different religious traditions, the Christian group holding Muslim prayer group and a Sikh filmmaker telling that story, it was like, we still have a shared belief in the value of faith. And, to have a religious leaders, spiritual leaders, Sister Rose is so eloquent. I mean, for her to actually go beyond the keep your faith in God and pray, it was like, go out and vote. It was just so great. I didn't even have to direct her much, but it just came together and it was a great first little project to sort of make all on your own. So thank you again for featuring it today.
Well, and I think it's so interesting how both your film and Donita's film were made in 2016, and here we are now in 2020. And Donita, I know you worked with Dawn for a long time getting this film done, and here we are now today. How are you feeling?
Well, 2016 was a surprise in some ways. And 2020 is in some ways a repeat of 2016, but to a degree that I've always known how bad voter suppression is and how it could be, but just to see it so blatant in 2020, it is it's really difficult to register. For instance, today, the Supreme Court of the United States refused to allow Pennsylvania to stop counting ballots on Election Day. And, they gave 3 additional days. We have a COVID pandemic. And to really try to suppress the vote in ways that people really just can't overcome, it's really unconscionable. So, I hats off to the Supreme Court today on that issue. Of course, the Supreme Court has made some decisions that have been very, very, very detrimental to where we are in this country at this point. Of course, one of them being striking down a critical section of the Voting Rights Act in 2013.
So are you hopeful? Are you encouraged at all that at least from your efforts in 2016, people are more aware as voters of what the possibilities are for their vote being suppressed?
I think people are certainly aware today of the potential of having their vote just thrown out. That is why we cannot if you have an opportunity to vote early, you should vote early. Don't hold your ballot. It's not a masterpiece. If you like it that well, take a picture of it, but put it in the mail, put it in a drop box, and make sure that you get your ballot where, to the polling place or to the Board of Election or supervisors of elections in ample time for it to count. Our mail is much slower than it was in 2016. It's an average, mail is taking an average of 7 days. In fact, even in my county, it's taking 7 days, which you can't quite grasp. I think people are certainly aware of those things happening. There's a lot of education that's happening. And I'm somewhat surprised when voters still really are confused because there is a lot happening, but it's just such a new process, this year's cycle. As I was saying earlier, I live in New Jersey, and New Jersey this year will every person who was registered to vote received a vote by mail ballot, and those vote by mail ballots, voters basically thought, well, if I choose not to vote by mail, I can go in on election day and vote, and I'll vote on the machine. Well, there are no machines on election day, and in fact, they have collapsed a significant number of the polling places. And if you do decide to go in, you will cast a provisional ballot. And as many of you saw in the film, where I advocated for the young lady to cast a provisional ballot, I did that only as a last resort. Provisional ballots are counted at the end of all of the other ballots. And if in fact you cast a provisional ballot because you have a problem, you then have to come back to the Board of Elections and cure that or fix that problem. And so it is a last resort. And so I don't often advocate for provisional ballots, but I do in this instance, and I will do it certainly in New Jersey if individuals decide to go and vote in person. But I would strongly encourage people to vote early, and to, if you have a absentee or vote by mail ballot, to vote that ballot.
You know, the first night of this series, we showed the film Capturing the Flag, which was about a group of attorneys who traveled to North Carolina, to Cumberland County in 2016. And Laverne Berry was interviewing one young Black man who had come out of the polling place, and he had to do a provisional ballot. And I thought his quote was so perfect. He said, "It's like playing a football game. The game is over, and now you can play." Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that just really struck me, because it's like, yeah, what good is that? So yeah. It's incredible that New Jersey purposely took this stand. I'm flabbergasted. I had no idea. So thank you for the work you're doing around that.
Well, you know, the one thing I will say is that I am glad that New Jersey did take the stand that they did. They took the position of sending everyone a vote by mail. I'm really glad that they did that, because this way people had an opportunity to vote within a longer span of time rather than just election day. So I don't want to leave anyone with the impression that what New Jersey did was not a good thing, because it was. It's just that people, you know, the voter now has to vote that ballot instead of waiting to the last day to vote a provisional ballot. So, you know, I just wanted certainly to be clear of that. And the last thing I just wanted to say, when you mentioned what the man said about the football, we did a reported advancement project right after provisional ballots came out, and we titled that report "A Fail-Safe Measure or a Trap Door," and that's exactly, you know, how we felt, you know, about provisional ballots, certainly at that time.
Mm-hmm. So, AK and Zoe, how do you feel the subject matters of your films play into where we are today with the election, and with just sort of where we are in society and the world?
Go ahead, Zoe.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. That's a big question. Well, I mean, I think, you know, with the heated political environment that we're unfortunately continuing to live through, you know, especially, you know, for people that are immigrants, like especially during these COVID times, I think there's not been enough coverage in terms of like their rights as humans and how they have not been protected, especially during these times. They haven't been protected at all before, and this just kind of like pronunciated the situation even worse. I think I read at some point an article maybe a month or two ago about they were potentially sterilizing some women in these camps in a state. I don't remember which state it was in, but in the United States, a doctor just performing, you know, mandatory sterilization treatments on the women. So like the fact that these, you know, human rights continue to be violated, I feel, you know, makes filmmakers like myself and obviously the entire Marisol's team, you know, kind of like a call to action. Like we have to continue to tell these stories and tell it in a way that is authentic and it is promoting conversation and change. And, you know, it's not just about, you know, making entertainment content or, you know, creating content that is diverse for the sake of diversity and representation. It needs to have a purpose. And I truly believe in the impact that stories have in the world, in people. So as idealistic as it may sound, that like I do think storytelling has the power to shift an attitude. I really stand by it. So yeah, I think you know, Marisol, we shot it back in 2017. And it was relevant then, and it's only become more relevant. Like as we were shooting it, editing it, everything, marketing it, when it was released on HBO, like during all that time, you know, more and more narratives, you know, kept creeping up in the news about how these immigrants are just continuously being violated of their rights. It doesn't seem like we're moving forward. It really feels like we're moving backwards. So, I mean, to me, it just means I really have my work cut out.
You have your work cut out, is right. And I'm going to get back to you on that because you told us some news earlier that I want you to share with everybody. But we have some questions coming in from the audience now too, but AK, go ahead and answer that question if you would.
Sure. No, I echo everything Zoe just said. And the film, actually, there's a film coming out, Belly of the Beast, that talks about those forced sterilizations, especially in jails. And I think since we've been making our films, the ones we shared today, the health pandemic, the racial pandemic, it just highlights a lot of the problems that have existed for a long time. And as artists, the tools of filmmaking have gotten democratized. We're able to tell more stories. And I think the more we can show these stories, the better off we all are. I mean, one person recently who I interviewed for another project said, you know, it's not the soldiers who are going to save us, it's the artists. And that really gets highlighted in times like these. Even though it's harder to go out and make films, there's a lot we can do in terms of storytelling that can really be a strong tool in terms of bringing people together and be a call to action. I mean, you know, maybe not too many people went to Sister Rose's, you know, parish and heard her say, go vote, but a film like this at least gets that story out and reminds people, regardless of our differences, the common humanity and how we need to come together, and especially in times like this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So from our audience on Facebook, we have a comment and a question. It says, great films. Thank you all for your hard work. And how do you feel? Let's see, there's two questions. Thank you for your hard work. And how do you feel your chosen forms of storytelling helped convey the complex meaning in your films? Well, I think you sort of both just answered that question. And then what does it mean to make the unique experiences displayed in these three films more visible and accessible to a variety of audiences? And I think that's sort of, you know, even though Zoe, your film was on HBO and Voting Matters has been shown quite a bit, you know, I never hesitate to show films again to a creatively speaking audience because we haven't seen them. We have not seen them. It's still a matter of getting as much exposure to the intended audiences as possible. So how does that sit with you, Donita? Are you happy to hear
Am I happy to hear of the distribution of the, you know, that it's out?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I think anytime that we can draw attention to voting, you know, I wholeheartedly support it. You know, voting it's the power of our voice. It's building power in our communities, and it's so very, very critical. And I don't want this type of film to be shown only during a presidential election. it's the elections in our communities that really impact our lives every day. It's the city council, it's the board of education, it's those type of elections. So I don't want to miss how important it is to really to vote in those elections, that, you know, those municipal elections that happen, you know, every couple of years. And so, you know, we can show those type of documentaries, or really just continue to raise and talk about civic engagement. And that's the other thing. It's not only about voting,
Right.
It's about engagement. It's about being engaged. I mean, it's about, you know, when you run for public office on a lower level, you're building a pipeline. You're building a pipeline to higher offices. Communities get to know you. And so, you know, that's the other thing that, you know, we don't talk enough about, is how important not only voting, but being engaged from the very, very beginning. And I think that in some ways is lost on our culture. When I graduated from high school, we had to take a course called the Problems of Democracy, POD. You could not graduate without it. And that really taught us about the importance of being civically engaged.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's sort of why I also put this program together, because it's not only about voting. It is about what we're supposed to be about as a democracy. We're all supposed to be engaged citizens and participate.
And thank you again, Michelle, for making platforms like these accessible and showing more of the films. I'm grateful to such platforms and everybody who showed the America Heard series, the collective films together since 2017, because the more we can see them, especially with indie work, the more we can get it out, the better off we are. And more, it also empowers filmmakers to be able to tell more stories. So yes, thank you again for that.
Exactly.
Zoe, any response?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything shared. I would have loved to had taken that class in high school. I feel like that's my number one complaint, that I just wasn't instructed as much in terms of like what my civic duties were. And I think, you know, as someone who migrated from Puerto Rico to New York, I have to say that, you know, I can empathize with, you know, people that move to this country and don't necessarily think about community building right away, because you're just so focused on, you know, finding your flow and your rhythm and where you belong. So, you know, I remember the first time you know, 2016 was the first time I voted for a president in the United States, because Puerto Ricans don't have a right to vote for presidents if you live in the island. So, you know, it was a monumental moment for me, but it also opened my eyes in terms of like, okay, like I can understand why, you know, some people hold back from voting. Now that I've been through that experience, then how can I engage other people to start doing it? Almost like I did it, you can do it too. And it feels great, even though obviously the results were terrible in that election. But I still felt like I did what I exercised my right, and it felt great. So I hear you on all of that, and I think especially for Marisol's audience, which I hope is, you know, a majority is for Latinos to see themselves on screen. I think, you know, I had the opportunity to meet this amazing Dominican historian. Her name's Johanna Fernandez. And she was talking to me about how, like, it's projected that by, like, 2045, the Latinos are going to be the majority in this country. And the moment she said that, I was like, wait a minute, like, now it's like even more urgent to put these stories out there, because what if we continue to be portrayed as these like passive victims or perpetrators, how are we going to have a voice by 2045 that yet like we can execute all this power and say, no, this is where we stand and this is our worth and this is what we want for this country. So to be able to share it in a platform like HBO was obviously it was very humbling, because I felt like, oh my God, we can really push the film out there and get as many eyeballs on it as possible. But also getting to you know, participate in festivals like these is always so humbling and amazing too, because like it's not only about screening the work, but it's also about talking about the work and sharing it with other filmmakers. So to me, it's always like an amazing ride.
Well, because you mentioned your colleague from Dominican Republic, I must tell you, one of our Creatively Speaking team members is from the Dominican Republic, and she says she remembers her grandmother singing De Colores to her when she was a little girl, and it was very emotional for her to see it. And so you have to tell the story about the young girl actor.
Yes. So that song was not written to the script. We were in the middle of casting the young girl, and we were a little nervous because we only had just like a limited amount of options. And when she came in, her audition was singing this song. Like she brought that song to us, De Colores. And yeah, but by the end of that audition, I think the three of us, like Tim, Lauren, and I, were just crying, being like, "That's the song, and that's the girl. Like, we're good." So that was her choice, and a very good choice.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting toward the end of our time, but I don't want to close without hearing about your upcoming work. And Donita, how are you going to celebrate once this election is over? Are you taking a break?
Oh, I wish I could, but I have no illusions that we're going to know that we are going to be finished counting the ballots on November 3rd. And so I am prepared for the long haul, certainly in places where provisional ballots, people, voters have an opportunity to cure them maybe 7 days later. So I am cautiously optimistic that we will have such that the turnout that we're seeing will manifest itself in a way that there will not be significant numbers of ballots left to count to determine the election. And so I'm just one day at a time. I like to say, I'm planning, but again, I'm just hoping that we will know who is the actual candidate without having to go to court to figure that out.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears, my dear. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Indeed.
Okay. It's a pleasure.
And Zoe, tell us what you have coming up next. And AK. AK, you first.
So I'm grateful to be in a film fellowship in Oakland by Represent Media. And one of the projects that I'm working on is a Black female sculptor who lives in Oakland and is working on a historic commission. I mean, given everything that happened this summer and with monuments coming down, she just happened to be working on the first ever memorial that's going to go up as public art to honor the Black Panther Party, because to this day, our country doesn't even have one of those. So I'm just really honored to be able to tell that story and hoping to do that justice.
That's fantastic. Amazing. Can't wait for that.
Thank you for distribution help, Michelle. So.
Oh, absolutely. And Zoe, tell us about plans for Marisol.
Yeah, well, we've been doing a little bit of writing. We were overwhelmed with the positive reception on the short films. So Tim and I we decided to develop it into a longer concept, and we finished writing a pilot, and we're in the process of working on our pitch for it. And obviously the short film is kind of like a good point of reference, but the pilot expands more on Maria's voice, actually, as a Latinx influencer who uses social media to share the harrowing stories of her mother, who's currently in a detention center.
Wow.
So yeah, we're really excited about it, and taking our time. I think this is a very weird time, obviously, in the world, but ironically has allowed a lot of people to just write and develop material. So we're trying to take advantage of this window, and just continue to develop those ideas.
Well, keep up the great work, all of you. I mean, we need every single one of you to keep doing what you're doing, because it's amazing important work that you're doing. And we really thank you for being part of the program. And this was our last evening, so we're ending it with this amazing group of women that I'm very thrilled to have had with us.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Michelle,
you.
and the whole team of Creatively Speaking. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Congratulations to everybody.
Thank you. Congratulations all. And it was a pleasure to be here with you, Michelle.
Thank you, Donita. Appreciate your taking time away from your hard work.
Thank you.
So here we are at the end of the third night of the Creatively Speaking, We the People, the Shoestrings of Democracy series in collaboration with Metrograph. Thank you so much for Matt, Jake, Lisa, everyone at Metrograph to get this happening and to do it so well. And we hope to be back with you doing something similar soon. And we're hoping that Donita's encouraging words stay with us for November the 3rd, for real. And with that, I'm going to say good night and stay in touch. And don't forget to vote.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.